All right, here we are live in Jerusalem, the eternal and undivided capital of the Jewish people, Avi Ebelo, and again in the eternal and ancestral homeland of the Jewish people, sitting with Mordechai Ben Avraham, someone who I am blessed to call a friend because we've met in the past, and who I interviewed in the past. So this isn't going to be about his story, which is fabulous and unbelievable, right? Because here you're talking about an African-American from Los Angeles who was the top of the entertainment industry, and he converted, and he's here studying in Jerusalem as an Orthodox Rabbinical student. So that's an unbelievable story. I'm going to put the link to the interview I did with Mordechai Yosef, I think it was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago?
Almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, so I'm going to put the link there so you can go get his story. Today, we're talking about an extremely important issue, and I am very thankful to have the opportunity to be speaking to you about this, because it is a really big issue, important issue, and I think your perspective is so important and super critical because of your background. Yeah. So again, we're talking about the growing divide between Jews and blacks, African Americans in America today, following the growth in anti-Semitism, specifically in New York City, coming from African Americans against Orthodox Jews, visually appearing Jews. Just without any specific question, what are your thoughts while this is going on? Because here your identity is both. Yeah. You're the African American, and you're the Jew, and the Orthodox Jew with the same visual as those being attacked in New York City today. So just put it out there. What are your thoughts today?
I guess to start with, first of all, it's extremely unfortunate. I think what we're seeing, is a certain level of lawlessness that exists in the African American community, period. And this lawlessness comes from the deterioration of families, the deterioration of community, and the inflection of drug culture, and so African Americans are, I saw a video of a Jewish guy walking down the street, and it was a group of African Americans, and they threw something at him, and then they walked away, and they went and attacked him. But that's the same thing that African Americans are doing to African Americans. So that has to be a foundational point. This is part of the culture that's the byproduct of the deterioration of family, the single parent family issue. Along with that, I think there's something to be said about the jealousy that Jews have had to deal with for maybe even you could say it's since medieval times. Having their own insular society, having a certain level of fulfillment within that insular society. And I think a lot of African Americans see the contentment that Jews have. They see the consistent prosperity, and they look Jewish. A big part of African American culture since, the end of slavery was assimilating into, say, white American culture, whether it was perming the hair, whether it was dressing a certain way. And I think the idea is that we've been trying to fit into secular society, since the beginning, and we have no fulfillment. And in fact, we're worse off now than we were during times of segregation, in terms of economics, in terms of community, in terms of education level. Wow,
that's big to hear you say that. You really think that the African American community is worse off today than during the time of segregation?
Statistically, they were property owners. Statistically, they had communities. There were 2-parent households. Economic mobility existed. Was very pervasive. Think about it. There were, because of segregation, you had black-owned hotels. You had black-owned theaters. Black-owned barbershops. You had black-owned restaurants, and black people own these things. The civil rights movement, which largely funded by African American families, that had disposable income to support the efforts of Martin Luther King and a lot of these people. So this affirmative action really undermined the sustainability. And if you look at the Jewish community is successful in a very similar premise. It's insular, it's community based, it's family based. It rejects a lot of the corrosion that you see now in the media and secular society that is really affected. Hip hop is really, undermine the self-esteem and dehumanized, African Americans with each other. I mean, the music is very much celebrates violence. It dehumanizes women. It looks down upon family. It looks down upon community outside of, an aggressive effort around drug and gun culture, And so I think when when you look at a lot of the videos that there was a guy who went around and interviewed people in New York, African Americans. It was a Jewish guy.
Ami Horowitz video.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about it.
Yeah, and so he went around and he communicated and he talked to African Americans. And it's like the consistent theme was, it's like, well, the Jews own everything and this is our community and this is our thing. But, you ask the question, it's like, well, why weren't they upset, with, the white community? And maybe they were. But why weren't they as vocal? Why weren't they attacking? Because why? Because Jews are a minority, and Jews have had an open arm. I think the guy who did the shooting, they said that when he was younger, he was he would be he would help Jews on Shabbos.
You're talking about the Jersey City shooting?
The Jersey City guy. That was his path.
He used to help Jews on Shabbat.
Yeah, he used to help. So it's like the Jewish community has been open. So it's I think.
Wait, what's the point you're trying to make about that? Meaning,
I'm saying it wasn't like he was in an environment where he was being oppressed by Jewish people. He was there. He was open. He had a friendly rapport. He was communicating.
Got it.
And somehow that led to an ideology where, he saw it took him to a place of rage. Maybe he was mentally unstable. I don't know the whole story about like who the guy is, but the point is just saying that the consistent theme of all the videos that we're seeing and a lot of the hate crimes is coming from a place of, you guys have something that we don't, and we don't understand why you guys aren't trying as hard to fit into mainstream. I'm using the term white, but it's not racially based. It's the idea of what the American dream was, and the white picket fence and the 2-car garage and that imagery and how that it's evolved. And we're trying to fit into that, and it's not doing anything for us. And the Jewish person is very much content with the life that they have, living Torah mitzvot. They don't want to dress in Versace. They don't want to dress in Louis Vuitton. They don't want to hang out at the club. They don't want to have, cars with, 20-inch rims on them or anything. And I'm not limiting the African American community. I'm just talking about the imagery from hip hop,
right, that
has, been very destructive to the psychology of African Americans.
So, and when I was actually thinking to myself, you know what? Maybe I should play that Ami Horowitz video and watch together. Mm. What were your first thoughts watching that? Because my first thoughts watching that, it was interesting. Most of the answers was, I don't have a problem with Jews, but the Jews own all the property. Mm-hmm. So, to me, I'm thinking, okay, so for like most sentences, when you put a button, forget about that first part of the sentence. There's already that inherent, not necessarily hatred, but an inherent inculcated education against Jews that a majority of them were talking about. And these were just people on the streets he randomly asked, and a majority of them gave across that. Not all, thank God. There were some that were no, I love the Jews. They're wonderful people, wonderful neighbors. But a majority of them did have that same attitude.
Yeah, so the thing is, it's like, I think a way to kind of understand it is like, I don't know if you saw recently, the whole issue with Iran and the United States. There were ideas being shared from Iran where he said something like blacks are treated poorly in America.
Who said that?
The Iranian leaders.
Oh, the Iranian leader said that? No, I didn't say that.
Yeah, he was saying that, and he was like, and I saw African Americans, online that, I know. I mean, I'm on social media, and there was like kind of like this sense of like, oh well, or the guy Kaepernick, the football player who.
Okay. I don't know who that is.
Yeah, he was a football player who did the kneeling, and they kicked him out.
Oh, Caper. Yeah.
Did I say his name wrong?
I think so. I think it's Kaepernick, something like that. But yeah.
Yeah, so he came out and says, oh, this is an example of American imperialism and this whole thing. And so I think the African American community has been tremendously wounded through the racism and segregation and abuse. Even though I said earlier, they economically and as a community were more prosperous, but still psychologically, they've never had a process of healing and a process of dealing with slavery and what that meant to them and how it dealt with them. And so I think that has created a very vulnerable and very easily influenced individual and community. So when people on the outside have seen this, and a lot of African American conservatives will tell you this, that literally people on the right will become very upset if you deny the idea that you're a victim, if you deny the idea that you can accomplish whatever you want despite of whatever social constructs exist. And many of the biggest people who speak out against black conservatives are liberal whites, and because the narrative and the pain that the African American community has experienced through slavery and through police, brutality and through economic inequalities, it's made them to the point that all you have to do is say, this person's racist, like if you see like the way they're dealing with Donald Trump, there's really no real foundational points other than maybe him saying some over the top things or whatever. But Donald Trump historically was hanging out with rappers. You know what I mean? Donald Trump was hanging out with Snoop Dogg. He was hanging out with the Dr. Dre's. He was around the Jay-Z's. He was with the Mike Tysons. He was doing all the big fights, and he was flamboyant and he's the cool guy.
And I heard there are plenty of hip-hop songs, again, from before he became president, where where basically the hip-hop lyrics are saying, we want to be like Donald Trump.
Yeah. Jay-Z had lyrics like this, Young Thug. I mean, a lot of people had that. But the point is saying that the thinking process in the African American community is in a vulnerable state, that all you have to do is say someone's racist and maybe create some type of narrative of why or some proof to it, and they'll jump on it. No problem, they'll jump on it. And that mechanism has allowed a lot of people from the Middle East, the Middle Eastern agenda, a lot of the radical Islamic agenda has allowed them to come into the African American community and say, hey, this country Israel, the country that's, which is the crazy thing about it is that Israel is a country built on immigrants. It's built on people fleeing oppression, people wanting to create a sense of independence away from white supremacy, whether it's in Europe and Germany and these different things. And so this was the country's built off of. But the agenda from the radical Islamic agenda has got into the community and he's convinced African Americans that Israel, like America, is the enemy. And that thinking process has now spilled over to now you say like, well, the same Jews who are marching with Martin Luther King for, economic equality, for social justice, and for these walking with the Sefer Torah, walking down the street. Now, in our generation, Martin Luther King was a Republican. Martin Luther King was pro-Israel. But now, in fact, I think the only street in the world outside of in America that has a Martin Luther King street is Jerusalem, right?
Yes.
Right around the corner, But today, because the African American community is so vulnerable and so susceptible to outside messages, you have, these people from the far right and along with, and another thing about the far right too, most of the people who are speaking out, the Muslims that are on college campuses, they were fleeing Islamic oppression.
Right.
That's why they came to America.
Yep.
That's why they're at UCLA. That's why they're at Oregon or NYU or whatever. And so they've convinced the African American community that Israel is oppressive, Israel is against the Palestinians. And I could say, coming to Israel, and I've been here almost 4 years, and I've talked to everybody. And the thing that I have learned the most is that the majority of the Palestinians that I have met want to go to school, they want to become educated, and they want to live the Western dream. Now, why isn't that the case? There's a good example. There was a gentleman a Palestinian who ran for mayor. I don't know if you remember, like 3-4 years ago.
Where?
Here in Jerusalem.
Okay.
He ran for mayor, and what happened is that he was told by Hamas that if he continued to run for office, he was going to be killed, and him and his family, and they're going to make an.
Oh, right. So he had to pull his name out.
He had to pull his name out of it. And so the point is saying that when you look at what's going on in Gaza, when you look at the fact that people are being put in prison, people are being executed because they're speaking out, because they're challenging authority, it's a shame that no one is defending them. No one is talking about the Muslim who wants to, be educated, who doesn't want to be indoctrinated by terrorism, who wants to, have a nice car and have a nice home and its kids. And in fact, the Palestinians who live in Israel, live in Jerusalem, are very successful. They're in the universities, they're growing economically. Some of them have huge mansions and are doing very well here. But that story is not being told. The story that's being told to the African Americans is that, what's happening to the Palestinians is negative, and it's just like what happened to the black people in America. And from that place, they've organized and created a sentiment in the African American community that Israel is bad, and connected that to the Jewish people.
Are you touching upon the fact that the Nation of Islam is growing and becoming more influential in the African American community?
I mean, the Nation of Islam has been influential for a long time. I think that the people from the Middle East have influenced people in the Nation of Islam with this ideology. And I think that there has maybe even an economic relationship between the two. I mean, if you look at, most of the masjids that have been built in America were funded by people in the Middle East. Wasn't funded by black communities. And so...
Wait, explain to people what a masjid is.
Like the house of worship for Muslim people. Okay. I grew up, my parents, in fact, were Christian, but they got involved into Islam, more on the Sufism side of Islam. Yeah. And we grew up, but they were more, my parents were more about like working on yourself and transforming yourself and spirituality than politics. But at the same time, I was still like aware of what was going on. And most African Americans were aware of the Muslim community. So most of the mosques in America were funded by sources outside of America. And many of the imams, the people who were the preachers or the rabbis of the Muslim community, took over to the Middle East, and in fact, my dad even told me when he was in college that they had a program where they were going to African Americans on college campuses. This is like in the 70s. And they were basically recruiting them and taking them over to like places like Saudi Arabia to train them on Islamic training. And my dad was kind of like, in the 70s, it was like, you had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you had Muhammad Ali. It was a very inspirational moment for them. Right. And he said the reason why he didn't get involved into it, because he was like, excited about it. He said, because I was being born soon. And he met my mom, and so he didn't get involved in the whole thing. But they recruited a lot of those people. And then if you do history... Yeah, if you do research, around the times of Malcolm X and these different things, it's like a lot of these guys were like, informants. These weren't people that were piously teaching, religion and piously teaching, community and together. There was an agenda, from day one. So unfortunately, in this generation that we see today that has a community where religion has failed it completely, on all sides in the African American community, with the youth, now you have this, you have residue of these ideas, and that's what the Jewish people are dealing with right now. So
you're saying that a lot of the anti-Semitism that's now coming out from the African American community is heavily influenced from a Muslim influence on the African American community.
I think the catalyst of it is politics, and I think the catalyst is, the catalyst is the liberal, the left movement. Utilizing, like, I don't know if you remember, like, when Obama was in office, when Black Lives Matters kind of, like, came on the scene.
Mm-hmm,
and there was all these big protests start happening. If you remember then, you would see people with Palestinian flags at some of these.
That's the whole intersectionality movement.
Yeah. And so I think that part is more of an informational vehicle today. I think that people who are connected to, say, things like the Nation of Islam and these other groups, they're older people. You know what I mean? They're older people, and I don't know how...
So it's not necessarily Islam, but it's the anti-Israel agenda coming from the Muslim community in America.
The political
activism of the Muslim community.
Political activism, the political activism of the liberal left,
right.
and to some degrees it does, have. But I think the Muslim community, in terms of what existed in the past, I think if you look at any of these speeches, they're older people there. They're not young kids. At, you say, Louis Farrakhan speeches or some of these other, Tony Muhammad, some of these other guys that are out there. These are like older people that are a part of that older generation.
You're saying it's not necessarily
when you
spreading.
see the kid attacking a Jewish kid on the street, he's not connected to the Nation of Islam.
Right.
But he does have a sentiment in his mind that, the Jews in Israel are somehow connected to white supremacy. And that comes out of the political side of the Democrats. I mean, the Democrats have been very vocal about being, against Israel, very, almost pretty much like anti-Semitic. I mean, you have some of their biggest stars are the ones who are, very vocal about speaking out against, Judaism, speaking about, the Jews having dual loyalty. And it's really unfortunate, especially for the lady Omar, because, when I was back in Los Angeles, one of the things that I did, I worked for the American Refugee Committee.
He's referring to Ilhan Omar, the Congresswoman of Minnesota. Yeah.
Yeah, I worked for the American...
Muslim Somali, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I worked for the American Refugee Committee, which is a subsidiary of, like, the U.S. State Department. And they hired me to design, like, campaigns for, like, fundraising, because the issue was... One of the issues we were dealing with was the Somalis that lived in Somaliland that were fleeing Islamic radicalism. They were going to Kenya, and that Kenya has the largest refugee camp in the world. But on the way to Kenya, many of these people were dying because it was like it was a long journey. I don't remember exactly how long it was, but they were dying of diseases like cholera and other things. So we were building hospitals
on the way.
So
wow.
So yeah, and that was one of the campaigns. It was I'm a Star campaign. A lot of different people were involved in it. But the point is saying that. So I got very close with the Somalian community. I met a lot of Somalis. I talked to them. And the fact that Omar is so obsessed with Israel in her own country that she fled Islamic radicalism. That's why she's in the West. And all the Muslims that are in Minnesota fled the West to flee Islamic radicalism. What's the group over there?
ISIS?
No, not ISIS. It's
in Somalia?
In Somalia.
I don't know. Boko Haram?
No, it's another name. I can't think of the name. But the point is,
there's so many of them. It's crazy.
So exactly. So it's like they fled to come to America to get away from Islamic tyranny. And I had friends that were Somali that told me, "Hey, before the Islamic radicalism took over, women weren't wearing hijabs. They were wearing like one-piece bikinis at the beach. Similar like
Iran.
Like Iran, exactly. And so this is like a phenomenon. So these people fled out of that. But I've never heard her talk about Somalia.
Exactly.
I've never heard her talk about any of the pain that her people are going through. And that is the proof that her agenda is connected to a bigger agenda, which is attacking Israel and using the American platform to do that, preaching anti-Semitism. I don't know the other lady. What's her name? Like
Linda Sarsour?
Yeah, who's actually, I think, a Muslim convert.
Really?
Yeah, I think she's just a white lady.
I didn't know that.
Muslim. Yeah, and so these people are going around telling you Israel's the problem and Israel's the problem and these different things. And it's just like, wait, what about all the Muslim kids who don't have adequate education? Hamas, for example, here is like a $3 billion organization. The leaders fly on private jets. When their kids get sick, they send them to Israeli hospitals. But the average person, the average Palestinian, he's suffering. And I just feel like I have a responsibility to speak out on that because, I converted to Judaism. Judaism teaches us to love. It teaches us to see people who are suffering and to speak out against injustice, and the Muslim people here, the vast majority that I've come in contact with, talk about the oppression. They do not see Israel or Israelis as the problem. They see the radical groups that are using all the money that comes from international funding for their own bidding, and the destruction of communities and the isolation, and using Israel as a scapegoat for the pain that they're inflicting, on their community. And it's sad to see in America that no one's speaking up for these Muslim people that want to have regular lives. You know, who's speaking up for them? Who's going to, okay, like, even if you have an issue with Israel and you say, like, this policy is incorrect or the IDF acted in this way and I disagree with that, okay, fine. That's fair. That being an American, that's normal. You know, we have issues with the American government. We should have did this. We should have that. But again, who's speaking up for the Muslim who wants to have a normal life, who doesn't want to be indoctrinated to be a suicide bomber, who wants to be able to go to college, who wants to be a chemist, who wants to be a scientist, who wants to be a musician, who wants to be a skateboarder? You know, what about that kid in that family? What about them? Who's advocating for them? And what is the distraction on why they don't even exist anymore?
And it's interesting, just to bring it to current events, literally to today. Yesterday, Ilhan Omar went public with the Democratic press conference dealing with Trump's Iran strike of Soleimani, the Iranian arch-terrorist responsible for terrorizing hundreds of millions of people across the Middle East, including Iranians. Most Iranians today are celebrating that he was killed because they've been terrorizing Iranians. Yeah. And yet, here she, the Muslim Somali immigrant to America, she doesn't say a word about the hundreds of millions who've been terrorized and murdered by this man. And Muslims, she complains about Trump starting World War III. Not a word about, thank God, these hundreds of millions of Muslims in the Middle East. Life isn't perfect, but at least they don't have Soleimani and his terror to continue terrorizing them.
It's just, you know, I mean, it's an agenda, and again, like the fact that she doesn't speak up for the Somalian people who are suffering in refugee camps right now, who are tyrannies. You know, when I was working for the American Refugee Committee, we were going to actually go over to the area. They're going to fly us over and see it. And the reason why we didn't go is because a few days before, they had the plane tickets already purchased, the whole thing. A few days before we were going to fly over there was a graduation in a hotel of, I think it was like close to like 100 Somalian, you know, young adults who were educated in the UK to become doctors. And so they came over there, and I think it's called El Shabazz. Could be. I think that's the organization. But they came over to have a graduation in a Somali hotel, and the whole thing was bombed, and they killed all of them. Why? Because they were educated in the West, and they're bringing Western ideas back into Somalia. So again, like, there's just tremendous suffering happening with the Somalian people. And it's sad that this congressperson, who's being funded by CARE and other... And
Qatar also.
Yeah, in other organizations, and she's just being a bullhorn for their agenda and completely forgot about her people. And again, I just think the sad part is the innocent Muslims who just want to live a normal life, that don't want to fight anybody, that want to go to college, that want to become educated, that want to have businesses, and want to live the American dream in their way.
Just to bring everyone up to speed, here I'm talking to Mordechai Ben Avraham, originally from Los Angeles, a convert to Judaism today, studying as an Orthodox Rabbinical student here in Jerusalem, talking about the growing divide between blacks and Jews, and he's talking now about Ilhan Omar, and because of the influence of the political left and the Muslim left intersectionality in America that he's explaining has influenced black Americans to turn and become more anti-Semitic. I wanted to take you in a different direction for a second, because here we were talking about the political impact upon the African American community and the Islamic anti-Israel political movement. I want to touch about Jeremiah White, because that doesn't have to do with the politics with Islam. That actually he's a pastor, a Christian pastor. He was Barack Obama's pastor for years. What was silenced in the media and even in the Jewish community is that Barack Obama went to his church for years, and he was a known, not only an anti-Semite and anti-Israel, but anti-American, very hostile to America. Does that have any influence as well in what we're talking about, or is that only a small...
I mean, I don't know about him specifically, but the left side, the left wing of politics in America has pretty much took out any form of patriotism. Like my grandfather on my father's side, Edward Doherty, he fought in the Korean War. and he actually lost a lung. I remember, I think he was alive when I was born, but I never met him. But I was told he lost a lung by being in the swamps so long, that it was so much swamp water that he had to have one of his lungs removed. And so many African Americans fought throughout wars. They fought in the Civil War. And so the left agenda has been, what it did was it took the patriotism out of African Americans, and it focused on some of the limitations that American society has had throughout its stages. I mean, we did have Barack Obama and Michelle Obama as president. At the same time, there is the prison industrial complex. At the same time, there is drugs. How did these drugs get in the community? I don't think African Americans went to Colombia and negotiated. So it's just to say, and they didn't have control over the border. So there are fair tainas, there are fair concerns from the African.
That was beautiful, folks. That was beautiful. Mordechai Yosef is a rabbinical student. He just used a term from Jewish learning. Tainas. That was beautiful. Oh, beautiful. All right, keep on going.
So we're not saying that there aren't legitimate gripes, that the African American community, has. But at the same time, what's the solution? How do we change this enormous abortion rate? How do we change this broken family system? How do we change even in terms of economics, economic mobility? The highest unemployment rate in America is African Americans under the age of 30 years old. So these are the concerns that the African American community should have, and that's not being addressed because there's a sense of hopelessness that comes from, I'm not even a part of this country. This country does not care about me. This country isn't worth anything to me. And to a degree, I'm against the country. Now, the only people that benefits are high intellectuals in the African American community who are head of these organizations. Racism and promoting racism is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's a business. All these organizations, if you looked at them combined, they're raising tens of billions of dollars every year to have this activist group and this activist group and this organization, and they're fighting against this and they're fighting against that, and all these things are to combat racism. While you have kids in the inner city who have nothing. The schools are destroyed. They don't have any money. The people aren't able to pay taxes to improve things in the community. So a lot of what we see is a byproduct of people taking the vulnerability of African Americans because of all the challenges that they've been through, and taking those vulnerabilities and turning them into economic agendas for themselves and leaving African Americans out. So when you see Jeremiah Wright speaking against America, what does that do for the young kid who's in school right now, who has American flag in his classroom? What does that do for him? What sense of pride does he have to say, what, I could become president of the United States, or, I can become a business leader, or I could create a solution to improve my community, and I could also make money from it. It's these things don't exist. I remember my grandmother, in blessed memory, Marie Reinhardt, on my mom's side, I'm talking about both my grandparents, she told me a story about a guy who became a millionaire in her community. She lived in a community in Los Angeles, in the area in View Park. See, it's a nice residential area. It doesn't have that very much crime. But she told me about a guy who became a millionaire because he would go and knock on people's doors and ask them to if he could repaint the address on the sidewalk. And people would say, yeah, repainting it, the mail will be delivered more efficiently, those types of things. And this guy African-American guy, just went house to house and created business. But when you take this sentiment of being anti-American, when you take this sentiment of being anti your community and anti-leadership and anti-institution, then that kid isn't even allowed to have the cognitive processes to think creative in this way. Every kid wants to be a rapper. Every kid wants to be a basketball player, because that is the only way that they have been shown to glorify, their individuality and their uniqueness. And unfortunately, every year there's only 20 NBA players that come in.
Right. So I have one question. From all of that, how does the Orthodox Jew turn into victim number one? They're not. I'm not hearing about random whites being attacked on the street.
Yeah.
I'm hearing about random Orthodox Jews being attacked by African Americans.
Like I said before, I think the African American community, I think America in general, I think materialism and the desire for materialism and these ideas has created an extremely empty, spiritually and emotionally empty individual in communities. And I think that goes for, many of the people who were supporting, even Donald Trump, and also the African American community as well. And even to a degree, I think the Latino community still have some sense of family in their culture. They're still in the early stages of being Americans. And so I think that the religious Jew has a sense of contentment and a sense of peace with their lifestyle, and I think that makes people who are broken and upset and empty extremely angry.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue, and I think the one of the reasons why I was excited to talk to you was to talk about maybe solutions. Mm-hmm. And I think
before you get to the solutions, I want and this will lead to the solutions.
Yeah.
Are you afraid now to walk down the streets of New York City, looking like an Orthodox Jew? Even though you're black?
I think once you convert to Judaism, your fear level, about most things decrease.
That's a fabulous answer.
Yeah, I just think you're just about Hashem, and you have to do good, you have to do the right thing, and maybe that comes with, adversity. Maybe that comes with challenges. But, I fear Hashem, and I fear my actions, my personal actions against God, like committing an avera, saying the wrong things, looking at the wrong thing. That's what I'm scared of. I'm not scared of somebody attacking me. If that happened, hey, if I'm being attacked for being a Jew, I mean, on a certain level, it shouldn't happen. But in Judaism, it's a great thing. It's a great thing, like that I am a Jew and I'm challenging just my energy. Now, if I'm going out doing the wrong thing, that's another conversation. But if I'm minding my business, looking like a Jew and being proud of the Torah, being proud of the world that Hashem has created around me, and that brings someone to violence, that's a Chiddush Hashem.
That is such a hard concept to explain for people to understand. It sounds so weird. What do you mean? It's a good thing. I'm being attacked because I'm being who I'm supposed to be. The point is not that it's a good thing we're being attacked. The point is that we are being who we're supposed to be. If that is why someone is attacking them, that is horrible that they're attacking us. But I'm in the right in living as a proud Jew.
And I want to say something too. It's like there's a big difference between the American Jew and the Israeli Jew.
Let's go.
Because I would be very. If you go to some of these like settlements, you go to some of these outskirts, you transplant those guys into New York, those black kids will have a big problem.
Don't you dare take us on, baby.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's a different mentality with the Jew who connects to the power of Israel. The fact that we have a nation, the fact that this is literally the Torah being expressed right now. Like it's happening right now. The Torah is being expressed right now. And so that sense of confidence, you're seeing a completely different Jew than you see in America, who immigrated maybe from Lithuania and came from places throughout the Europe and to places throughout the Middle East, and they were subjugated by white supremacy and Islamic dominance. And so when they came to America, they just wanted to fit in. They just wanted to fit in, and that's where a lot of the conservative and the reform movement comes from. This idea is like, hey, it was the fact that we were Jewish brought all of this harm to us, so let's tone down the Judaism and let's just be as white as possible and fit into that society and be less Jewish. Now the Jew over here, he's like, you know what? Come and get me. I'm not scared of anything. He's fighting terrorists.
We're fighting the real anti-Semitism. Yeah. Every day we have anti-Semites trying to murder us, and it happens to the anti-Semitism from the Muslim community. But the beautiful thing about what you're just saying right now, I tell people as well, and it's a sign, you're home.
Yeah, exactly.
I explained to people, we're more confident in Israel because we know you're home. This is our home field advantage.
Exactly.
And that's how you know you're not at home in America or in London or in France or in Turkey or in Hong Kong. because you do not have that confidence level of being on your home field.
And the home field itself is a place of holiness, of kedusha. So you have an extra power that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. When you're here, you come here, you learn, you come here and you daven, you do tefillah. It's a different power. It's nothing in America. It's emptiness. It's materialism. That's it. And you can't, if you're too Jewish, you could lose your job. If you're too Jewish, somebody may come and attack you. Here, people are coming here to rebuild themselves. I meet so many people, and I speak to so many people that are here rebuilding lineages that were going through the very oppression that we're watching in America right now that's happening to the Jews. They're rebuilding that. They're reclaiming their Judaism. They're reclaiming their Frumkeit. They're reclaiming their relationship with Torah. That's why they're here. Israel economy, we got a lot of work to do. You know what I mean? No one's saying this is perfect place, but at the end of the day, why am I here? I converted to Judaism. I'm Jewish. This is where Jews are supposed to be, in Israel. That's the connection.
Right. And Mordechai's here because he's a Jew.
That's it. That's why I'm here.
Oh my God. What you're saying, such a breath of fresh air to hear you say it. And you want to know something? It's exciting for me to hear that. I mean, I talk about that all the time. It's exciting for me to hear it said by other people, other religious people, other Israelis. But and I'm saying this as a compliment. You're a unique man, Mordechai Yosef, because of your background, because of, yes, your color, because you're a convert, and which is all beautiful and special. And again, I don't tell people they have to convert. You could be a great person even without being a Jew. That's not my message at all. You happen to join the Jewish people on your own volition and take upon the responsibilities. And to hear you talk like this and say these things about Judaism, about Israel, about being a Jew, about the difference between Israel and a Jew living in the diaspora and the exile, it's like mind-blowing, folks. You got to send this video to everybody. And now we go to the solutions, because that's the most important thing.
Yeah. So
the solutions, again, we're talking about the growing black-Jewish divide in America, and it was important for Mordechai Yosef to talk about solutions moving forward.
Solutions. So I think there's two parts to it. There's the religious, spiritual part of it, and there's an idea inside of Torah that says, for every Jew that rejects the Torah, God Almighty creates an anti-Semite to remind them that they're Jewish, and to remind the Jewish community that they're Jewish. So on one level, anti-Semitism is an internal dynamic. It's something we have to fix as Jews. We've been in diaspora, we've been separated from our Torah, we've been separated from our value systems, and we've been looking at Western society and their big buildings, and we forgot about the Temple Mount and these different types of things. And so we have to bring many Jews back to Torah, bring Jews back to peace of mind, bring Jews back to sanity, by Kiruv and these things. So that's one level. But the other level is Jews of color having responsibilities to their brothers to communicate to the outside world. Because much of the anti-Semitism that we're seeing is misconceptions about what Judaism is, what a Jew is, and what Israel is. And so there's many Jews of color that are educated about Judaism and are living here in Israel. I know so many, I personally have met like at least 20 to 30 African-American converts that have been in and out. Some people come here and learn, they go back. Many are in universities, things like that have come here. But the Jewish community has to see the value in Jews of color having platforms. Like you're giving me a platform to share this idea, and positivity is coming out of it. But the Jewish community has to see the value of African Americans, specifically Jews who've converted to Judaism, who learn Torah, that keep the mitzvot, that support and see the value of Israel for humanity. The light that comes from Israel is not just for Jews, it's for the whole world, it's for all of humanity. If we had the Temple Mount rebuilt right now, the Muslims would be even more happy, the sages tell us. The light of the Temple Mount goes all over the world. If the rest of the world, the sages tell us, if the rest of the world knew the light that comes from the Holy Temple that's just right down the street, and the Jews doing the mitzvah of doing the Maisa inside the temple, that light will bring so much peace that the non-Jewish people will be fighting for the Temple Mount at the UN. But because we're separated, and we are not proud to be Jewish, and we're not proud to keep the Torah and to be a light to the nations through the Torah, because of that, We have that issue. But the point is saying that we have many talented African Americans that need a platform and need support to get out into the world. You know, they need to be able to speak. The Jewish community has supported more black Christians supporting Israel and going out than African American Jews. You know, and we're talking about the Torah. The black community wants to hear about what the Torah has done for my heart, what is done for my character, what is done for my aspirations, how much love I have for the African American and for the Latino and for the white and for everybody. Judaism teaches us to love. That's our key thing, is love. That's our power, is love, tefillah, and Torah. You know, that's what it is. And so having the financial capital to support these efforts is imperative. It has to happen, because on the college campuses, it's like, you know, it's interesting. There's a HBO special that just came out with a famous rapper, Nassim Black. He's an Orthodox rapper. He's a great friend of mine. He's Mamash Sadik. You know, he's a real deal. I look up to him. You know, I'm learning to be a rabbi and to teach Torah for my whole life and to bring as many Jews back and educate the non-Jewish world about what Judaism is. But his character and who he is, he's such at a high level. We did an HBO special that basically talked about his life and how he was a gangster rapper and how the Torah transformed him to only want to talk words of Torah through music. But it came out, and it's on Facebook. It has over 1 million views. And it really confused the left wing, because if you attack us, on what premise? We're African Americans looking to connect to God at the highest source. We're in Israel. Israel is a place of healing. What black person in America doesn't need healing? So when you put those type of images out in the world, it's very difficult for people who want to characterize and categorize Israel and Judaism as being this isolated, you know, or racist or apartheid place. It's very difficult to say that when you see people of the culture. Like, I worked in hip hop, you know what I mean? I have many of the rappers that are on TV now that are making big impact, selling millions of copies. I was with them and their parents negotiating deals with major record labels. I've done TV shows around hip hop, you know, movies, all these things. So we're a part of the culture. We're not like, you know, some guys, you know, they use the term Uncle Tom guys. No, we were in the hood doing these things. Now, I was lucky enough that my parents were very successful, and I grew up in an affluent community, and that gave me gave me the ability to actually maybe think, you know, in a very, you know, clear way that led me to Judaism. And my parents were very supportive. They came here to visit me for Pesach Ben Izman. You know, we hung out, we went to all the holy sites, everything. So we did. They actually were. They sat at the Seder table. So my mom did, at least. And so the point is saying that I'm, you know, reaching out to the Jewish community and saying that we need support to be able to create images, to create, you know, videos, to create short shows, to create web series, and we need money to promote these things. And we need money to be able to go out to college campuses and tell our story, not about politics, we're talking about spirituality, healing, Torah, and how we're doing that in Israel. And being able to have those messages and to have those types of ideas put out in the world, especially with African Americans. If you look at the comments, you know, on the HBO special, would you look at them on YouTube, or
you have to send me the link.
Yeah, I mean, all you do, Nassim Black Vice, VICE.
Got it.
That's it. It's right there, and you can do it out on YouTube. But when you see it, you see the comments. You see a lot of black people like, "Whoa, I didn't know that. I didn't know it was like that. It looks like you guys have found yourself. Like you guys found peace." And I'm even in it at the end, you know. So I'm just reaching out to the Jewish community and the religious Jewish community specifically, you know, because one of the things that really hurts me is that a lot of African Americans who see the light of Judaism, sometimes they get sucked into the conservative and reform movement, and they don't give them the gift of the Torah. They turn them into social justice warriors. And next thing you know, this person who's Reformed Jewish has never kept Shabbat in their life. There's never been in real holiness of Kedusha environment. that person now is writing articles online about how they felt that they were discriminated against at a Orthodox shul, and because of that, there's racism in the Jewish community. And I'll say this too: it's like racism is what my great grandparents and grandparents went through, and even my parents to some degree. That was pure hatred that was institutionalized in America. In Judaism, it's very difficult for a Jewish soul to hate. It's very difficult. But what you will see is cultural differences, and what you will see is the lack of tools on how to integrate. And when you look at Israel specifically, it's a melting pot of Jews that you have a Taimani Jew and a Litvish Jew, like
you have black Jews, yellow Jews, white Jews, red Jews,
everybody,
Indians, Egyptians, North Africans, Africans, Ethiopians, Europeans,
the Chinese.
Exactly. You have right again. We have all colors, right? I tell people Jews are, because in America today, especially the left, what do they say? Oh, Jews are whites.
Yeah,
white.
Exactly.
They have the white privilege. What are you talking about? We're not white. We're Jews, right? We are all colors. Exactly. Going back to your point.
Yeah. So exactly what you're saying. So it's like when you see cultural people from different cultures trying to interact with each other and trying to live in a society, you will see tension. You will see tension,
right? Natural.
But to take the Western concept of racism and apply that's just not fair, and that's an attack against my heritage. You're marginalizing the heritage of my ancestors that actually dealt with real racism. They had lynching parties.
Right.
They were lynching black people in forests, and they would have parties that had cotton candy and popcorn there. These things really happen. These people were being raped, all types of things. So when you see someone bumping shoulders with me, or I live in Meir Sharim, which gets it's
an ultra Orthodox neighborhood in Jerusalem.
And some people in the religious community, people who are more on the modern side, they have issues with it. There's
meaning with you, meaning that
not issues with me. I'm saying they have issues with the community in Meir Sharim.
Oh, meaning there's some Jews that have community like tension with the ultra Orthodox community.
And Jews are very opinionated people. In every neighborhood in Israel, there's a different opinion on how Israel should function, right? So you could see those tensions, and you could say like, oh, well, I'm living in Meir Sharim, and maybe this guy that, I'm standing in line and maybe he cuts in front of me, or maybe some guy, who's never seen it. I have people come to my apartment that have never seen a convert before. Have never met an African American, and they come to my apartment to get blessings from me.
Wow.
Right? They come for brakas, chassidim, right? They come to my apartment. There's like rumors about me in the neighborhood. And so the point is saying that if I take an uncomfortable experience I have with an individual or at a particular place and say, oh, well, that's racism, then I'm not in the Torah anymore. I'm out of the Sugya. I'm back in America. I'm back, marching in the civil rights movement. I'm not a Jew that's trying to bring Mashiach to all of humanity. So these ideas of the experiences that African Americans have, I think, are different than the Ethiopians, are different than all the other groups. And because we have a narrative in America that we have a responsibility to go out there, but we need the Jewish community to support us,
That's fascinating. You're saying there is work to be done for Jews who have, again, you're referring to the Jews who have strong belief in Torah and not just look at Judaism as the social activism.
Exactly.
And to reach out to Black Americans and help fill a void.
Yeah.
And a misunderstanding,
and
try to turn the tide.
And not just Black Americans, Latino Americans, Muslims that are from the Middle East, everybody. The Black voice in the world is humongous. That's why everyone is using African Americans for their political cause, because the voice and the innocence and the sincerity that the community does have has been abused, is abused and brought even more darkness, to the African American community, because they're saying things that are just against God. When you go against the Jewish people, you're going against God. When you see a person dressed like a Jew, he's saying, I don't want to be like MTV. I don't want to be like, the runway show in Paris. I want to dress in a way that that I'm a Jew. And then every time you see a Jew, we remind you of the Torah. And every time you get reminded of the Torah, you get reminded of God, the King of everything. So we definitely have work to do, and we have a responsibility to be a light to the nation. It's not just advocacy against anti-Semitism. It's about bringing the total revealment of God into this world and to get the concealment out. And African American Jews, religious Jews, need support from the community. And I'm going out, I'm advocating, for many of the African Americans, people. I'm connected to most of the African American religious Jews here and in America, and I'm advocating for the Jewish community as a collective, but this almost marketing component that can just bring so much light to the world through, our narrative.
So, 2-minute soundbite message to the Jewish community, how what they're dealing with the growing anti-Semitism from the African American community. What's your 2-minute soundbite?
So 2-minute soundbite is the African American community has been abused by a lot of bad information, and we have a responsibility as Jews to correct that bad information. And we have, thank God, we have people in the community that share the same cultural experience as many of the same as the people who are professing anti-Semitism, and we need to embolden them and empower them to be able to go out into the world and tell their stories and to communicate into the world that we're here and what you've heard is not true. And the most important thing is for us to go out and talk to Jews who barely know that they're Jewish and be able to talk to them about the benefits of reclaiming their heritage and the benefits of the healing that exists here in Israel through the Kedusha of the land that God created.
And now, 2-minute soundbite to your fellow African Americans.
Yeah, so my soundbite to African Americans is just like, we love you, I love you, and we know things have been wrong, and we know you've been hurt. And I'm a part of that as an African American. I understand what you're saying. We share the same tears, but attacking the minority group that most reflects you in the world is counterproductive. And it's not only counterproductive, you're empowering white supremacy, because the Jewish community, just like you, has been under oppression as a minority. And if anything, because of the Jewish people's connection to the Old Testament, you should be looking at the wisdom and what they're doing and looking to mimic that, to take yourself out of mental, physical, and intellectual slavery that's been put on you by white supremacy.
Unbelievable. Mordechai Yosef, this has really been a hard topic, but a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah.
Right? It's a sad topic to have to talk about, but a real pleasure talking to you, to hear your background, your perspective, because you come with it all. You come with the African American background. You come with the Orthodox Judaism, the convert. You got it all. Israel, America. You really got it all. Mind blowing. So much mind blowing information. I hope people are listening. I hope people share.
And
yes.
Avi, I just want to give you a blessing, because sometimes people who are advocating for Israel and they're talking about all the different groups, we live in a politically correct society. So if you say something that it seems like it's a slight, you could get a bad rap, you could receive judgment. But I want to give you a bracha that the world sees that all your teaching and bringing to the world is a unified love for God from humanity. And you see the Jewish people and the Jewish people being here in the Eretz Israel as a mechanism to do that. And you don't have a problem with anybody. You have a problem with evil.
Right.
The Torah tells us to get rid of evil, and that's what you have a problem with. And I think every sane person in the world also has a problem with evil. And I think just the world, I give you a bracha that the world just has more clarity to the good work that you're doing, and the Jewish people see the good work that you're doing, and they're able to support you in your efforts as well.
Amen. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Mordechai Yosef Ben Avraham, real pleasure. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. This video, you have to share. You cannot not share this video. Mordechai Yosef has a unique voice. This is such an important topic that everyone's talking about. Headline News just had the rally in New York City against anti-Semitism in response to the growing attacks. Everyone, every Jew, every African American, every American should be watching and hearing what Mordechai Yosef has to say. So please, share this video, help this information get out there. Signing off from the eternal and undivided capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem, here in our eternal and ancestral homeland, the land of Israel. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.